Black History Month gatherings. For the second year in a row, a group of Dr. Johnson students from the African American History elective have volunteered to create 3 presentations in order to honor the history of African Americans and to remind those in our school that the fight for equality is far from over. So, some background on Black History Month. Carter G. Woodson, who is often referred to as the father of Black American history, created Black History Week in February of 1926 in order to honor the triumphs and acknowledge the suffering of African Americans. Of course, Black history was largely ignored by Americans despite Woodson's efforts, despite Woodson's efforts, and one could argue that it's still swept under the rug today. In 1969, the Black United Students at Kent State University proposed extending the week to a month, and in February 1970, the group celebrated the very first Black History Month. Finally, on February 1st, 1986, Congress passed Public Law 99-244, declaring that February is National Black History Month. The law also acknowledged Woodson's contribution to the cause by stating that 1986 was technically the 60th anniversary of Negro History Week. A question I've heard a lot in the past few years is, why is there a Black History Month but no White History Month? Isn't that racist? Of course, I am not the best person to answer this, as I am white, but I can try. For starters, white people were never bought and sold as property. White people did not have to fear domestic terrorist organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan coming into their homes. For centuries, African Americans were denied opportunities in education. Most white people have never had a police force that does not work for them. Topics in Black American history is an elective, but white-dominated history is required both here and at schools across America. So, when posed with the question, why is there a Black History Month but no White History Month, I think the simple answer is because white history has been treated as the universal history for centuries. It has never been so important to keep fighting for the rights of African Americans. This is especially important for white students such as myself. Donald Trump poses threats to African Americans, whether it be through proposed voter ID laws, through dangerous rhetoric regarding law and order, through appointing cabinet members affiliated with the KKK, and through blatantly stating that individuals of color cannot perform their jobs adequately because of their race. Trump and his cabinet do not acknowledge or respect the rich history of African Americans. Just last week, he described Frederick Douglass as, quote, an example of somebody who has done an amazing job that is being recognized more and more, I notice. Seems funny, but it's not. Our president does not seem to know who Frederick Douglass is. He is the perfect example of someone who treats white history as the primary and only history available. So, white students, I have a suggestion. Learn about Black history. Take topics of Black American history, go to lectures, ask your teachers and friends questions, go to protests. Study the sides of history that are not readily available. In our lifetimes, it has never been so important to be an effective ally. So, without further ado, Dr. Johnson students are excited to present our first presentation of the Black History Month entitled Black Herstory and the History of Medicine, Malpractice, Mathematics, and Magnificence.
Number 1 for malpractice. J. Marion Sims was an American physician and surgeon, famously known as the father of gynecology. Sims was born in Lancaster County, South Carolina, and owned slaves throughout his life. He practiced medicine in Lancaster County and later established a practice in Montgomery, Alabama. From 1845 to 1849, Sims conducted a series of experiments on Black women, which led to medical breakthroughs in treating vesicovaginal fistula, which results from difficult childbirths. Sims operated on 3 Black enslaved women whom he identified as Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy without their consent. Sims got away with his experiments because by law, slaves had no personal rights and were the property of their owners. Not only did the women not give consent, but were operated repeatedly without anesthesia. Sims argued that the slaves did not need anesthesia, claiming that Black women were able to bear greater pain, despite his own memoirs stating, Lucy's agony was extreme. She was much prostrated and I thought she was going to die.
On 103rd and 5th, just a few blocks uptown from here, a statue of Sims stands honoring his achievements in gynecology. The statue was dedicated in 1894, and only recently did the Central Park Conservancy mildly acknowledge the doctor's cruel behaviors in a small blurb added to their website. It reads, quote, "In recent years, he has become a controversial figure for his use of slaves as experimental subjects, with no other words on the matter. Personally, I find it horrifying that a man who detailed the torture of multiple African American women has a monument honoring his achievements without stating that he was guilty of malpractice. If you are like me and want the Central Park Conservancy to reassess the nature of the statue, whether it be to publicize the procedures Sims used to study gynecology or to have the statue removed and or replaced with something more appropriate, I'll be sending out the contact information of the Central Park Conservancy and the president, vice president, CEO, chairman, and other officials so you can contact them."
The Tuskegee syphilis study, conducted from 1932 to 1972, involved 600 black men who were used as test subjects in an experiment by the United States Public Health Service. The men, mostly poor and uneducated, were deceived into a lifetime experiment to determine the life-threatening effects of syphilis as well as other diseases and illnesses they might have contracted as a result of untreated syphilis. When the study began in 1932, 82% of Macon County's residents were black, and half of those lived far below the poverty line, with an average income of $1. Among black men, the syphilis rate was approximately 36%. Public Health Service doctors informed these men that they were receiving treatment for bad blood, a local term used to categorize a variety of illnesses, including syphilis, anemia, and fatigue, among many others. The doctors gave them the illusion of treatment with placebos, which ultimately worsened their overall condition. Placebos are a form of medication used for the psychological effect instead of the physiological effect. In the early 1920s, treatment for syphilis consisted of mercury and two arsenic compounds called arsophenamine and neo-arsophenamine. These drugs were highly toxic and often produced serious and occasionally fatal reactions in the patients. Mercury had since been proven ineffective as it caused devastating side effects such as injury to the nervous system, hair loss, tooth loss, kidney and heart disease, and lung disease. Despite this, these toxic drugs were still administered to the men. The true, terrible nature of this experiment was revealed in the 1940s when penicillin became the standard proven effective treatment for syphilis in all of its stages. Despite the 15 years of brutal experiments and trials, Public Health Service doctors withheld the medication and information about it from the black syphilitic patients. The Tuskegee men were kept in the dark so that the study could reach its ultimate endpoint, the actual death and autopsy of all participants. The stages of the syphilis disease show the detrimental damages and effects syphilis has when left untreated. Early stages included rashes, headaches, and fevers, followed by an assortment of skin growths, running sores, bone decay, and heart damage, later causing neurological damage such as blindness, insanity, paralysis, and death. As the men's syphilis progressed, the introduction of penicillin to treatment would have significantly aided them in dealing with the daily agony and debilitation that comes with the later stages of syphilis. Even as some men went blind and insane from advanced tertiary syphilis, doctors withheld treatment, remaining committed to observing their subjects. Raymond Vandelier, a lead coordinator of the Tuskegee experiment, was enthralled by the scientific study and unconcerned with the welfare of the men. He pushed to continue the study into a long-term, open-ended research project and was eventually promoted to the head of the venereal diseases department. The first article, published in 1936 in the Journal of the American Medical Association, reported that out of their 400 subjects, 75% suffered some indications of late syphilis. Half showed cardiovascular damage, and 1/3 had neurological symptoms. In 1947, he published the latest findings in the study of the Journal of Venereal Disease, saying, quote, "The life expectancy of a Negro man between the ages of 25 and 50 infected with syphilis while receiving no treatment is reduced by about 20%, end quote. Even with public, undisputed evidence that the men were dying, no treatment was offered. By 1969, physical examinations and autopsies revealed that as many as 100 of the men had died of syphilis and its complications, and others had died of heart disease that researchers later ascribed to syphilis. By the time the study was finally terminated in 1972, 128 people have died of syphilis and related complications. The Tuskegee syphilis study, in which approximately 600 black men with syphilis were left untreated by the U.S. Public Health Service in an effort to study the natural history of the disease, is sadly seen not to be an isolated aberration, but merely the most famous episode in a centuries-long pattern of unethical research behavior with blacks. Racism in medicine, a problem with roots over 400 years old, is an ongoing cycle that continuously affects African Americans' health and the way that they receive health care. The United States Public Health Service intentionally denied effective treatment to the study's participants, which led them to their death, where they could be used as research to ensure the success of the white race and the destruction of the African American race.
The Tuskegee study involved African American sharecroppers from Macon County, Alabama. The participants in the study gave no written consent for the experiment, which was run by the United States Public Health Service, and instead thought they were being treated for bad blood. The release of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment to the general public caused 3 major changes, including the Kennedy hearings, the National Research Act, and the formation of the Tuskegee Syphilis Study Ad Hoc Advisory Panel, all of which sought to improve the racist conditions that were exposed within the federal government and the medical research field. The Kennedy hearings were congressional hearings led by Senator Edward M. Kennedy on human experimentation. Kennedy publicized the injustice in human experimentation in an effort to create federal legislation that would protect all Americans against uninformed research. The hearings significantly exposed immoral actions of the Health, Education, and Welfare Department, the Center for Disease Control, and the Public Health Service during and after the exposure of the Tuskegee syphilis study. The National Research Act and the Belmont Report of 1974 outlined principles regarding the ethical nature of the research study, prioritizing respect, beneficence, and justice. The principles were established in an effort to protect all populations equally following the Tuskegee syphilis study. The Tuskegee Syphilis Ad Hoc Advisory Panel was founded following the exposure of the Tuskegee syphilis study in 1972. The panel was composed of both African American and white medical officials who could present an intellectual and neutral position on the composition and the ethics of the study. The panel was salient because it protected the rights of the participants from a medical perspective and confirmed the unethical nature of the study. However, the federal government's efforts in protecting Americans were limited because of the lack of legislation designed to particularly protect African Americans as a population that has been targeted since chattel slavery by the medical research community and the federal government. The effects of the federal efforts following the exposure of the Tuskegee syphilis study were limited. A 2006 study shows that African American males are more than 3 times less likely to participate in a research study due to their knowledge of the Tuskegee syphilis study. The consequences of the lack of federal legislation concerning the treatment of African Americans in medical research continues to affect the African American community today, despite the efforts of the federal government to correct the errors in judgment, ethics, and policies that were revealed in the Tuskegee syphilis study.
As most of you may know, the film Hidden Figures was released earlier this year. It followed 3 African-American scientists, Katherine Johnson, portrayed by Taraji P. Henson, Dorothy Vaughan, portrayed by Octavia Spencer, and Mary Jackson, portrayed by Janelle Monáe, who kicked butt despite the extensive adversity they faced. These women were brilliant mathematicians who revolutionized space travel and changed the scientific community forever. Nikki and I are going to give you a few facts about each woman to introduce them to you in case you haven't gotten the chance to see the movie.
Mary Winston Jackson was born on April 9, 1921 in Hampton, Virginia. In 1942, at age 21, she earned her bachelor's degree in mathematics and physical science. In 1951, she was recruited by the National Committee for Aeronautics, or NACA, which soon became NASA. She was recruited into a special wind tunnel project that required her to get qualified as an engineer. She petitioned the city of Hampton to allow her to take night classes offered by the University of Virginia at the all-white Hampton High School. She received permission and became NASA's first black female engineer in 1958. Towards the end of her career, she worked to promote diversity and highlight minorities like women and African Americans who were often ignored in the field. She retired in 1985 and died at 83 in 2005.
Katherine Johnson is a physicist and a mathematician who made incredible contributions to the United States' space program. She was born in West Virginia in 1918 to a farmer and a teacher who recognized their daughter's incredible adeptness for math at a young age. Johnson's hometown did not offer schooling for African Americans past the 8th grade, so her parents, despite the financial struggle, enrolled her in a private school. Johnson was a mathematical prodigy who graduated high school at the age of 14. She was the first African American woman to graduate from West Virginia University when she was only 18 years old. Later in life, Johnson became a single mother who was able to balance raising her 3 young daughters and a full-time career at NASA. She was responsible for the majority of the calculations relating to Friendship 7, which held the first American to orbit the Earth. And she also contributed greatly to the Apollo moon landing operation. In 2015, she was finally awarded with the Presidential Medal of Freedom by former President Obama at the age of 97.
Dorothy Vaughan was born in Kansas City, Missouri on September 20th, 1910. She graduated from her West Virginia high school at 15 years old and received her BA in mathematics from Wilberforce University, a historically black college, at age 19. After university, Vaughan taught math and at segregated high schools in Virginia until 1943, when she began to work at the NICA. She was part of the West Area Computers Group at the Langley Research Center, a segregated group of African American women who made complicated mathematical calculations by hand. Vaughan was made the head of the West Area Computers, becoming the first black supervisor at the NACA and one of the first females. After World War II, her work expanded into the development of the United States space program. She taught herself and other women, including Katherine Johnson, programming languages to prepare for the future of technology that she envisioned. She continued her work when her agency was succeeded by NASA and worked there for a total of 28 years. She retired in 1971 and died at 98 years old in 2008. To conclude the first out of our 3 assemblies this February for Black History Month, we'd like to leave you with a quote from Dr. Mae Jemison, the first African American female astronaut. She says, "Never be limited by other people's limited imaginations." Thank you.